If Wet Dry World is one of my favorite stages because of how open sandboxed and puzzle solving focused it is, Tall Mountain is one of my favorite stages because of how linear and streamlined the challenge of it is. Also, I really like the aesthetics, and I love that it actually has typical Mushroom Kingdom style mushrooms. Something in general I appreciate about the upper level of Peach's castle is that the 4 stages up there actually mirror the 4 stages on the first floor. Cool Mountain and Snowman's Land are both snow levels, Jolly Roger Bay and Wet Dry Land are both water levels, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but Tiny Huge Island in many ways feels like the next evolution of Bob-omb Battlefield. But perhaps the most distinct of these mirrored stages, and the 2 stages people are least likely to make some kind of connection between, are Whomp's Fortress and Tall Mountain. The aesthetic isn't all that similar. Granted, the aesthetic between Jolly Roger Bay and Wet Dry World aren't similar either, but at least there's a lot of swimming in both. But in regards to Tall Mountain, it is in my opinion the one stage that feels like it could be a harder version of what Whomp's Fortress was setting out to do. Both courses effectively start you off at the bottom of the stage, and you're meant to work your way up to the top. Both stages have bottomless pits surrounding the stage and could easily lead to a loss of a life and potential game overs. Both stages have multiple routes that involve points where you can break off or even take shortcuts to scale the mountain quicker. And both stages have stars that require you to jump into a cannon and blast yourself off into the abyss with pinpoint accuracy. The difference is, Tall Mountain takes everything in Whomp's Fortress and makes it larger, harder, and with more potential hazards that could lead to Mario's death. I think Tall Mountain takes some of the more streamlined linear path philosophies of the earlier stages like Bob-omb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress, and even Cool Mountain, and just shifts the difficulty up 2 or 3 notches, making it actually one of the most challenging and as a result, rewarding courses in the game for me. And quite frankly, while I can understand some of the complaints people make in later linear stages like TikTok Clock and Rainbow Road, not saying I agree or disagree with those complaints yet, but I understand them, I think Tall Mountain gets way more hate than is warranted. And obviously, in saying that, I'm going to explain why by going through the stars in the stage. The first mission is obviously the simplest objective. Scale the mountain. This is as linear as it gets. You need to make it to the top of the mountain. I've alluded to this before, specifically early on in this retrospective, but linear stars and linear paths to follow in and of themselves are not a bad thing. In fact, these linear paths follow the same fundamentals of Mario as he was in 2D, as well as what we would see later in the series in games like Galaxy and, 3D World and Land. Every sandbox 3D Mario game may be a collectathon, but they all have many linear challenges that could easily be considered 3D World type stages. In that they're linear paths you're meant to run through with a start and end point, only the game developers find a way to make it feel like it's more wide open than it really is. Even Bob-omb Battlefield in essence is a giant sandbox, but if you put a few walls on the side of the main routes it takes you up the mountain to get to King Bob-omb, it feels just like a 64 3D World stage. This is similar to the argument I used to make about the Sonic Adventure games before we got to Heroes and then eventually Boost formula. While yes, the earlier games were more open, the vast majority of players, at least the ones that aren't fully trying to break and explore every square inch of the stage, are going to play the adventure games as if they're just a linear path, point A to point B, without veering off too much. Mario 64 has many different stages on at least 1 or 2 of the stars that will have a clear endpoint in mind and basic linear route towards the endpoint, even though players can choose to veer off that point as they explore. But anyway, when you're scaling the Tall Mountain, your first obstacle will be a pit you need to jump over. If you fall, you'll land on land below and be able to collect coins to regain health and work your way back up. But you need to learn how to jump over that gap, ideally with a long jump. Pass by that, and you'll get to a second similar jump. Only this time, if you fall down, you'll lose a life. This is pretty typical platforming game design. Learn with one forgiving jump so that you can apply it to the next challenge. Continue around the mountain and you'll notice some red mushrooms with coins over them. We can pass by those for now, but at least we know where to find them. And better yet, once you head around the corner, you'll notice some platforms you can jump up that will require cartwheels and backflips to ascend, which will also contain red coins. This whole segment serves as not only a red coin challenge, but also a shortcut for the player that master Mario's control to be able to skip through a large chunk of the mountain. But for now, we'll continue our way around. You'll quickly pass by 3 Bob-ombs and eventually find one of those enemies that'll chuck you. If you can avoid him, you'll have to pass over a narrow bridge and jump over a gap that contains the pink Bob-omb and make it to the next area with a monkey. And you'll have to go through one of those rolling log challenges that we experience in Lethal Lava Land to make it over a large pit. If you can't pass by this, you'll once again fall down a waterfall and end up at the start of the stage and have to do it all over again. So you'll need to learn how to get through this point in order to continue up the mountain along this path. This could actually be a difficult challenge and will take quite a bit of expertise to accomplish. Luckily for players that still aren't comfortable enough getting through it, the previous shortcut was set prior to this challenge and allows you to skip past it altogether. I'm fairly certain I couldn't get through this log for a very long time, primarily because I was super young, but I was still able to get every star in the stage by avoiding the log, which made me always appreciate the shortcut. Regardless, when you pass by the challenge, there will be two routes. An upper one that'll require you to pass by some falling cannonballs, and a lower path that'll require you to jump across the platforms or monkey bar across. The shortcut from below also converges along these two paths, with the upper path requiring a few more leaps upwards to get to. Still, the two paths converge after these challenges, and players will now have to hit a long jump over a ramp and maneuver up the last few areas to make it to the star at the top of the mountain. The star itself just feels like a typical linear path you would take in any 3D platformer, with multiple routes and various challenges and secrets throughout as you pass through them, and I think it's one of the more enjoyable straightforward linear routes in the game. Star number 2 is titled Secret of the Monkey Cage. There are two ways to think about this star. Either you're a fully new first-time player and you'll probably run up the mountain back to the monkey near the rolling log and try to catch it. I'm guessing that's what most people will do and figure out the objective has nothing to do with this monkey. And you'll probably lose your hat, and it'll likely be a whole ordeal until you get your hat back and work your way back up the mountain, searching everything along your path and making it to the actual monkey you're meant to catch at the top of the mountain, making it a star that requires the same trajectory as the first star. But it'll be more of a search to figure that out. And the search generally leads towards players discovering more of the map, which I think is a positive aspect of a collectathon. The second way to view this map is the player might know to make their way to the top of the mountain, and in that case their route up the mountain could also be useful because now they'd be able to try the different routes and shortcuts along the way. So it would be a chance to repeat the similar objective while taking a more unique route in any case. But regardless, when a player reaches the monkey, he'll ask you to follow him. He'll go down to a floating cage and release a star from its location and let you jump down the waterfall to grab it. Next up is the red coin star. Hopefully by now you'll have noticed the red coins on the mushrooms and the platforms that take you up through the shortcuts. Finding the coins is easy enough, but there's a bit of challenge in actually collecting them. Primarily the ones on the mushrooms. The mushrooms have slopes along the edge of them, and some of them are a lot slipperier than the others. It's not uncommon to fall off and lose a life in this area, but it's also close enough to the start of the stage where it's not too terrible of a setback. After you head back around the corner and work your way up for the red coins, backflips, cartwheels, and careful jumps so that you don't fall back to the bottom. I remember the first time I played this I had an issue reaching the top red coin, and eventually figuring out it was easier to drop down in from the cannonballs up top, but now it's not much of a worry anymore. Either way, this is a pretty easy to locate red coin star, but moderately difficult to collect. It's a welcome star though, given a lot more of this stage requires a ton of traversal. Mysterious Mountainside is the next star. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this was the last star players collected, because stars 5 and 6 are actually visible if you run through the stage, and this one is super obscure. The star is the third and final slide in this game, and it's hidden on a wall on the side of the mountain that you enter as if it's a painting, but it blends in like the entrances to the Shifting Sandland and Snowman's Land. The star is in a location next to an angry cloud that'll blow Mario away, and you might bump into the wall because of the cloud, or rather because you're trying to avoid the cloud. That's the only thing I can really say to help the case for how obscure it is. But I will say it's one of those hidden locations that the first time you see it, you might think it's hidden, but after that it seems so obvious that a secret lies in that perfectly square segment of the wall that you can't help but assume your subconscious spotted the entrance to the slide on its own. Perhaps the one downside to this stage is that it's yet another star that will see you running up and down the mountain again. And by this point in time, you'll have seen enough where it's not all that interesting anymore, and could get redundant. But in fairness, finding the wall is only half of it, because the slide is easily the hardest of the 3 slides in this game so far. There's even a gotcha moment where the slide just cuts off and you're meant to turn. Now to be fair, there are a ton of signs telling you to make that turn, but still, with how quick you're moving on the first run, you could still get blindsided and slide right past it. It's a fun star too, and a very challenging one, fitting of a later star in the later stage in the game. And then star number 5 is hidden behind the waterfall across the narrow bridge at the top of the stage. You're meant to hit a switch that'll activate a platform for you to better jump into the waterfall, but you can technically get to the star just fine without it if you're comfortable in Wario's jumps. Either way, I could make excuses for the first 3 stars moving you up and down the mountain, allowing you to learn the stage, or at the very least one of them really forcing you to search every nook and cranny and require you to be victorious down the slide. But I can't really make an excuse for this star though, as it feels way too redundant by this point. I think the stage gets criticisms for 2 main reasons. One reason is that it's very difficult the first time around, which I think is funny because it's not nearly as difficult or as frustrating as at least 2 out of 3 of the remaining stages. And 2, it requires you to climb the mountain 5 times, which makes people whine because the automatic thought process was that if this was a true modern style open sandbox collectathon, they'd be able to finish most of the objectives by just getting up there one time. What I think people fail to consider is that if you're actually going into the stage blind, the routes through the mountain vary quite a bit the first 2 or 3 times. I mean, in any linear platform you play with multiple routes and more than one mission, people are okay with repeating those stages for the extra missions, even though they're more or less going through the exact same routes. And part of the reason they appreciate those multiple missions is because the game incentivizes you to run through the stage again to try multiple routes, as well as making more optimal routes through the stages or collecting a random MacGuffin as you traverse. I'm not sure why Mario 64 doesn't get that same point of view. Maybe people will automatically define it as a collectathon rather than view it as a 3D platformer, which would allow them to dock any linearity against it. I'm not sure, because I always appreciated that this game had searching, collecting, puzzle solving, action platforming, and linear route accomplishing all in one. I like that I'm required to go through some of these stages more than once, because I either get to try the alternate routes, learn the stages more, or find new and hidden secrets that I missed the first time. It's the same reason I like going for full completion in any platformer. The difference is, in Mario 64, those hidden secrets are just straight up power stars, and are the actual main MacGuffin. Would people prefer it if the branching paths were completely blocked off as they traverse up the mountain to make each traversal stand out? Wouldn't that defeat the whole purpose of being an open world style game where you can learn and choose your own routes? I'm not sure what the big deal is with so many stars in this game being in similar locations when the stages are almost always unique enough so that the routes to the star won't be the same. Especially in obscure objectives where you'll be doing more searching rather than simply running to a specific endpoint. This allows most stars to feel unique. While I agree with people when they say it's a chore to return to because you end up taking the same paths multiple times, I also wonder how many times did they play this game until they started to feel like it was a chore to return to. Because even with maybe 2 or 3 different 120 star runs, you could still get quite a bit of a unique experience going through many of these stages multiple times just based off you getting better and learning how to control Mario and experimenting with the movement. And even if that's not the case, who cares if it's a chore to return to? I swear, Mario 64 is like the only 3D platformer that gets judged based off its second, third, fourth, or even fifth playthrough. And that's probably because it's the only game people actually enjoy enough to fully complete more than once. But still, there just has to be an echo chamber that blows this minor nuance this much out of proportion. Good God, I haven't even made it to TikTok Clock and Rainbow Ride yet. I need to pace myself. But that being said, I don't think this stage is redundant. It has one more star than it probably needs that is redundant. First star, get to the top. Second star, get to the top and mess around with separate routes. Third star, get through the early stage red coin challenges. Fourth star, search the entire mountain for a mystery. Yes, starting the mission from where the red coins ended would be beneficial, but then it'd defeat the whole purpose of searching for the whole mountainside for a secret. And the fifth star is the redundant one that once again requires you to climb all the way up to the top just to jump into the waterfall. So with that star, we're now at 20 stars out of the 84 that I would say are actually redundant and significantly worse of an experience to put the player through. Also, the 6th star in the stage requires you to find the cannon and get it open, which hopefully you'll have done so by now, and blast off into the star over a mushroom ahead of you. We've done this a few times now. We've had plenty of cannon chances. This is the ultimate test of aim. You have basically no leeway. It's a direct shot or nothing. And this star is my final comparison to Whomp's Fortress. That one had an easier blast with pillars and poles all around you to help you. This one requires perfection, and will probably lead to a few deaths and maybe a game over or two while you're getting the hang of it. I remember going through a bunch of trial and error for it, and I imagine many people did too. But there was a huge sense of celebration and relief when I got it. And speaking of celebration and relief, the coin star in this stage is one of the hardest ones. Shifting Sandland and Hazy Maze Cave are the worst. But the problem with this one in particular is that there aren't enough coins. You have to go through the slide, which means if you hit 100 coins on the slide, you're probably not going to be able to grab the star. So you actually have to go through the slide first if you want any chance at success, but you won't know that until you actually go through the slide and not collect the star. Add on to the fact that this is a vertical level with multiple routes all around and many of the enemies offering only a single coin without blue coins splashed around in a plethora of locations to fall to your doom and start over. And you get yet another of the hardest missions in the game. And yet another one that is most likely going to be one of the final stars a person will collect only if they're going for full completion. But, and I know you've heard me say this before, I still like this mission. I like the challenge. I like that I experienced the challenge. And I don't think it's so absurdly difficult that it ruins the stage. Telltale Mountain is another stage that I adore in this game. It's well up there. Also, I really like the next stage, which over the years I've heard more and more people whine about. But when I was younger, Tiny Huge Island was often a favorite, and I'm pretty sure it was mostly because the gimmick reminded everybody of Super Mario Bros. 3. So next, we'll head over to that island and figure it out.